Friends, welcome to episode number, I don't know what it is, of Dulcimerica. My name is Futch. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, I'd like to get back into the swing of things with some lessons that are aimed at the beginner, intermediate beginner. Skill levels are weird to me. People who have been playing for a while, but are still not intermediate, and then the intermediate folks as well. Now, that doesn't mean that people of all skill levels can't get something from this as far as fundamental skills. So I think everybody will be able to get something, but we're going to kind of come down to a different level here and show you some very, very basic things before getting into more advanced techniques in the weeks ahead. Today I'd like to talk to you about chasing the melody. Chasing the melody is something that you do when you've got a chord melody situation and the chord stays the same, but the melody starts to move around a whole bunch. So instead of trying to hold down a chord shape and play that melody and find yourself stretching with ridiculous attempts to get into a different melody zone while holding the chord, you want to bring that chord up and follow the melody so you have a nice easy way of going about doing that, also creating a nice dynamic performance. So the first thing we're going to do is recap something that I talked about in an earlier episode, our three basic chord shapes when we're in DAD tuning. And these three basic chord shapes are the L shape. Here I'm playing a 3-3-5, those numbers coming from the bass string, middle string, and then melody string. 3-3-5 is giving us an L-shaped G major chord. And that L shape, of course, is movable up and down the fretboard. And depending on where you are on our diatonic 7-note fretboard, that'll either be a major chord or a minor chord. Major chords sound up and happy, and minor chords sound kind of down and depressed. Somber, if you will. So if you know what the basic feeling between major and minor chords is, you can find out what the name of that chord is by looking at the bass string. That's where the root of the chord is. So for the G major chord, the root is on the bass string, and right there at the 3rd fret I'm playing a G. It's an up and happy sounding chord, so I have G major. Then we have our slant chord, tic-tac-toe, 3 in a row just like that. And our root is on the middle string, again a movable shape. Sometimes you'll get a major chord, and sometimes you'll get a minor chord. As long as you know what you're playing on the middle string, you can name that chord. Here at the 2-3-4, I'm playing a D major. We got a D on the middle string right there. And then we have our extended slant. That's going to be tic-tac skip in a fret toe. And so there's our extended slant, and the root is on the melody string. In this case, I'm playing a 2-3-5 chord, and that's going to be a B minor. That'll also change to major and minor as you go back and forth. For example, a 3-4-6 chord will yield a C major because we're playing C right there at the 6th fret. Now, here's the trick. These chord shapes are all something you can invert with DAD tuning. It's a symmetrical tuning. So you can flip a 3-3-5 chord over to a 5-3-3 chord. And you can flip a 3-4-6 chord over to a 6-4-3 chord. Just be aware that when you're using the finger position and hand position where you're coming across and grabbing that bass on the bass string, that's a second inversion chord, and when you go to that, you're going to change where the location of the root is. So if we're playing a 3-3-5 chord, root's on the bass string. That's typically how dulcimer players play their chords, but if you do invert that to a 5-3-3, the root has now been flipped over to the opposite side of the fretboard. So now instead of it being on the bass, it is now on the melody string, G right there. If we're playing an extended slant and we flip that over, say 3-4-6 to 6-4-3, the root which was on the melody string is now going to be on the bass string. There is no change when you play the slant chord, however, because the root's on the middle string, and no matter what we do when we invert that chord, we are actually pivoting on the root note, and so that doesn't change at all. Just be aware of that, and be aware of whether you're playing a standard chord for us, first inversion, or a second inversion chord. It's going to require a different hand position than we're used to. All right, with that in mind, that might be a recap for some of you, and it might be just kind of an introduction to some chord theory. Now let's talk about chasing the melody. For example, for every single one of the chords available to us, there are these three chord shapes that we can use to play them. Sometimes the chord shapes are very obvious and sometimes they're not. For example, 002 looks like we're simply playing one little melody note there at the second fret on the melody string, but since we're not fretting the bass string or the middle string, imagine our fingers back there and you got it. There's an L-shaped chord, so that's an L-shaped chord. That means the root's going to be on the bass string. We're not fretting that, but we know that open string is D. So there's a D major chord for you. So there's our D, and then our slant chord with our D, and then our extended slant chord with our D. So if your melody is moving up the fretboard like this, and you're trying dearly to hold on, and this isn't a great example because we can always use the open drone as D. So why don't we look at G, for example. A extended slant for G would be a 3-1-0. We're not fretting the melody string, but if we did, you would see the shape of the extended slant. 0-1-3, same thing. If we fretted that open string there, D, we would have our extended slant. And then we've got our L-shaped chord, which we've looked at. And then we've got a slant chord right there. So you can see as you move along here, if your melody is hanging out down here and you want to back it up with a G chord, what if that melody continues to rise up and you find a hard time trying to hold on to this G chord down here? Switch to the next G chord up. Now, I don't have huge hands like Tall Glazner, but I do have pretty good reach. And I can reach up there with my thumb and get that note. But let's say that's presenting a problem to you. So what you do is you just switch over to the next G chord closer to the bridge, which is going to be right here. So you are keeping that chord the same, even though you're changing the voicing of it. The pitches are changing, but the notes are the same, and you are able to chase that melody wherever you need to go without trying to make these impossible reaches. Now, here's a little secret about how to locate these chords on the fretboard. Let's go back to the G major chord, the extended slant, 3-1-0 or 0-1-3. So the ingredients for this chord are G, B, and D. Have a G on the melody string, B on the middle string, and a D on the bass string. These chord shapes, these three basic chord shapes, are connected by one note up the fretboard. So if you were to start with this 0-1-3 extended, right here is a G, there's our D, there's our B, and now we've got a G chord. Inverted G chord. And what do those two chord shapes share? They share that fret right there on the melody string at the third fret. G chord down here, extended slant. That note is going to continue to be a part of the process. Now check this out. There's our next rung of the chord ladder. That's B. So we're going to go B, and then we're going to make our next chord shape, our last remaining chord shape, the slant. So we're going to go here, here to pick up the G, and here to pick up the D. They're all connected. Each one of these chord shapes shares a note. Each one of them shares a note. So if you're looking for what that next chord shape might be, just hold on to the note that's more than likely going to be closest. Actually, not even more than likely. The note that is closest to the bridge is going to be a note that's not going to change, and you're simply going to add the additional notes to it. Let's flip that around and do a 3-1-0. That's our connector. It's closest to the bridge. We're going to go ahead and pivot on that and put our L shape into place. Closest to the bridge, we're going to stay there and then bring in. You can do that with every single one of the chords available to you in any key that you're playing in DAD. That's a really, really super cool thing to know, and it's really good to be able to take those chords and move them, play them, not only in the first octave, but in the second octave as well, so that you can chase those melodies and have a lot more options available to you as far as chord voicings. Well, I hope this has been helpful to you, and there's going to be a lot more of this type of stuff coming, and I'll give you some exercises that you can work with. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.